Mahatma Gandhi's disciple Ramchandran asked him, "Are you against machinery, Bapuji?" Gandhi replied, "How can I be when I know that even this body is a most delicate piece of machinery? What I object to is the craze for machinery. The craze is for what they call labor-saving machinery. Men go on saving labor till thousands are without work and thrown on the open streets to die of starvation."
This is Sevagram, the ashram or community from which Gandhi led India's struggle for independence. Every day, some of his disciples come to the porch of his hut to spin in silence. For Gandhi, the charkha, or spinning wheel, was the ideal machine. It was for him a symbol of self-reliance. And Gandhi believed that the success of Indian independence and development depended upon the self-reliance of its 580,000 villages. But today, most of India's cloth is spun and woven in large textile mills. India's machines and factories rival those of any country. She is the 11th largest industrial nation in the world. Japan, England, Russia, the United States have all contributed money and technology to India's remarkable growth. But every year, Indians can buy more products made in India.
जूता है जापानी ये पतलून इंग्लिस्तानी सर पे लाल टोपी रूसी फिर भी दिल है हिंदुस्तानी मेरा जूता है जापानी ये पतलून इंग्लिस्तानी सर पे लाल टोपी रूसी फिर भी दिल है हिंदुस्तानी मेरा जूता है जापानी
Take this one.
But there is another India as well, not prosperous, for which industrialization has meant only a widening gap between poverty and riches. India has more than 650 million people. 40% of them earn less than 25 cents a day. 20 million Indians have no employment. The machinery of modern India has become self-sufficient, but not its people. Since independence, India has pursued a policy of heavy industrialization and the building of cities. But the cities are islands, surrounded by the unsolved problem of extreme unemployment. It's a labor-saving society with 20 million people out of work. Bombay's skyline doesn't look much different from this one, New York City. But a leading Indian scientist, Dr. Amulya Reddy, questions the appropriateness of such a model.
What I see around me is the great dream which has mesmerized the decision makers in the developing countries. The skyscrapers, the automobiles, the stores, and the whole infrastructure of industrialization upon which this has been based. And what these decision makers have tried to do over the past 25 years or 30 years is to replicate this pattern of development. But I wonder whether what they've attempted to do and what has succeeded to very limited extents in limited pockets in the cities of the developing world have any relevance to the poorest sections of humanity who are located there.
The economic and industrial policies of the last 25 years culminated in crisis in June 1975. Indira Gandhi, then Prime Minister of India, but no relation to Mahatma Gandhi, declared a state of emergency in an attempt to deal with the inflation, poverty, unemployment, and the constantly increasing number of people in the world's already most densely populated country. However, after 2 years, members of Mrs. Gandhi's own party felt the results did not justify the means. Thousands of political opponents had been jailed. There had been attempts at forced sterilization of the peasants and urban poor. Slums were destroyed without plans for the future of their residents, and news was censored. With unrest again growing in her own party, Mrs. Gandhi moved to consolidate her power once and for all by suddenly declaring elections. The result? A strong vote for a complete change in policy and leadership, a change which was led by the most beloved Gandhian today, Jayaprakash Narayan. Narayan, who died recently, gathered together several political parties and united them by their mutual hostility toward the emergency. He called for a return to the Gandhian beliefs which had been so successful in helping to win independence. Morarji Desai, prominent in Indian politics since independence and jailed by Mrs. Gandhi during the emergency, won the election to become leader of the newly formed Janata Party.
We belong to 5-6 different bodies, group political parties, and they had different programs, and they are warring people, but they have all agreed on one program, which is the Gandhian program, and the Gandhian method. The Gandhian method means the means that you use for whatever you do must be pure. Now, purity consists in truth, and it consists in not harming another people for your benefit. That is the meaning of pure means, and that is the basis on which our whole program is based.
Perhaps Mrs. Gandhi's most outspoken opponent during the emergency was George Fernandez, a powerful union leader. He was elected to Parliament from his jail cell and became the Janata Party's Minister of Industry.
And so the new thrust that was introduced last year, when we decided that we shall move away from the capital intensive to the labor intensive, from the centralized to the decentralized, and from the urban to the rural. And along with this came this question of appropriate technology.
The words appropriate technology herald international recognition of the failure of high technology to meet the needs of all societies at all times.
You pursued an industrial policy.
George Fernandez is speaking before a meeting of the United Nations Industrial Development Organization held in Delhi. The Janata Party government introduced a national policy based upon getting technology out of the city and into the countryside and putting man's need for a job above the dictates of machinery. The rest of the world is watching. Can a country which for decades has committed itself to developing large technological centers turn around and redirect its economy to small-scale development?
So there is an apparent clash, there is an apparent conflict. But it is not a conflict of technologies as it is a conflict of the kind of industrial culture that one wants to have. Whether profits should go to one company, to a dozen companies, large-sized, maybe widely held, or whether there shall be hundreds and thousands of small little entrepreneurs producing the same item, making it available to the people where it is needed, but in the process, by the application of appropriate technology, creating many more jobs than what a machine can produce.
In conjunction with the United Nations Forum on Appropriate Technology, the Indian government held an unusual trade fair. The idea was to show how many modern products can be made in small, decentralized factories using assembly line labor. That's how at least some parts of each of these goods are made. Millions of people visited the pavilions, which house exhibits from the 22 states of India. The government's most recent 5-year plan projects the transfer of 500 products from large to small-scale factory units using fewer machines and more workers.
From the point of view of happiness of man, who must be the main aim of all things that you do. It is that which is more useful, and therefore it is a happy blending of the heavy industries, the medium industries, small-scale industries, and the cottage industries that we are attempting. It's not exclusively small-scale industries only which are paying, because without heavy industries, modern life cannot be maintained. You can't have railways, you can't have electricity, you can't have transport, you can't have communication. They depend only on heavy industries, metals. All these require heavy industries. But that doesn't solve the problem of human needs.
If you mean to find the jobs to those who must be provided with jobs, and not in 10-year and 20-year frames or on a long-term basis, but here and now, then we are confronted with the problem of 40 million unemployed who are just there, apart from a large number of underemployed. You're also faced with the problem of about 6 million people who come into the employment market every year. And it is only the development of a technology that is appropriate to meet the needs of these people, in other words, creating jobs for them, that is relevant for us.
To employ one person in a big industry, you require an investment of 25,000 rupees to 150,000 rupees per person. And in a small industry of this conception, it requires only 500 to 5,000. So in the same capital, you can employ 10 times the people.
This is what Moraji Desai is talking about. Thousands of farmers from many miles around bring their sugarcane harvest to the nearest sugarcane factory. In the traditional mode of large-scale technologies, a single factory can make sugar from the cane produced by thousands of farmers. It will cost many millions of dollars to build and end up employing just a few hundred people. This is also a sugar factory. The designer is Mr. Garg, an engineer, who is showing it to George McRoby, a British advocate of small-scale technologies. Mr. Garg's so-called mini-factories are in fact world-renowned. This factory is 1/10 the size, 1/40th the cost of a large-scale sugar factory. Yet for a given output, it employs 10 times as many people. The factory cuts down on the amount of equipment and combines the functions of some of the machinery so that even with the larger payroll for salaries, sugar can be sold at about the same price. Because these many factories are cheaper, more can be built. Farmers do not need to travel for a day and then spend more precious days waiting in line before they can get back to their fields. Mr. Garg has developed a similar technology for cement plants, but these have not fared as well. Cement is a big business in India, and until now the business has been mostly in the hands of large factory complexes. George Fernandez explains.
Do you know that the first mini cement plant in this country was set up in 1962? But in the meanwhile, the cement advisor to the government of India was an agent of a cement manufacturing, large-scale cement manufacturing unit based somewhere in Sweden or somewhere in Europe. So you had a cement advisor who was for the large, and you had a technology which was of the small. Now, the two possibly couldn't have gone together. But in my view, you can have several hundred, I would say 1,000, 2,000 mini cement plants in this country producing anything between 30 tons to 100 tons per day. You know, last year China produced about 50 million tons of cement. Of this, 29 million tons came from 2,900 mini cement plants, varying in capacity from 1 ton per day to 30 tons per day. And you can do that here in this country. We have the technology, we have the wherewithal, but there is a resistance.
Naturally enough, the resistance comes from big business. Mr. Bhaskari, general manager of a large industrial complex, describes his reaction to the policies of the Janata Party government.
Well, I feel that if the present policy, which I think is dictated more on political considerations rather than on economic considerations, continues for any length of time, it would be headed towards bankruptcy. One of the factors which is often, I'm sure it's not forgotten, but it's deliberately put out of sight, is the fact that our population growth rate is so tremendous. On the one hand, our politicians always bring this point up when negotiating for loans from countries abroad or negotiating trade agreements with the developed countries. But on the other side, when dictating our industrial policies, they put this out of sight completely. We just can't afford the luxury, I feel, of slowing down our economic growth rate by even a fraction in order to try and dissipate the means of production into the rural areas and into the masses. We just can't afford it at this stage.
The kind of cloth sold in this store is surrounded by controversy for some of the reasons pointed out by Mr. Bhaskari. It is worn by those who wish to state their commitment to the Gandhian tenet of self-reliance. The material is khadi, hand-spun, hand-woven cotton. However, the peasants of the villages that Gandhi cherished cannot afford this cloth. It is more expensive than cloth made by the big mills. The problem is in the spinning of the yarn. Those who would like to ensure that khadi remains pure, that is, entirely handmade, are attempting to make the spinning process more efficient by developing small, hand-run machines which allow you to spin several spools at once. But so far, it cannot compete with machine-spun yarn. Many village women cannot even afford the cloth for 1 sari a year, costing $1. The Janata Party government wanted a kind of compromise, mill-spun yarn but hand-woven cloth. The yarn could be put on small spindles so that hand weavers could work with it. This process may still prove to be more expensive than buying cloth from the large textile mills. But there are almost 6 million hand weavers in India, most unemployed or underemployed. On the one hand, there is the problem of raising consumer prices. On the other hand, massive unemployment. Moraji Desai wants decentralized industry in order to revitalize the villages and provide jobs. Mr. Bhaskari sees less government interference as the best answer.
If they remove all the red tape and the restrictions on that and avoid trying to put hedges around industry for a period of 10 years, I think we'll see the Indian economy flourish, and the very people that the government is wanting to benefit, the rural poor, they will flourish. And let government also ensure that the wealth that is generated is genuinely siphoned towards those weaker sections of society, which is a government responsibility.
But towns are few and villages are many. As 80% people live there, and they are natural surroundings. Towns are all artificial surroundings. If more than that, we have 620 million people. And the modern big industries, we have also many, but they have not solved the employment problem. They can't. In the moment there is a big industry, even if it is in a village, it becomes a city. It doesn't remain a village, and it has its own industrial surrounding. And agriculture is the main basis of this country's prosperity also, and its civilization and happiness. It is therefore that we have got to pay more attention to the prosperity of the villages.
It is the peasant who has shared least in India's economic growth. Their life on the surface is much the way it has been for centuries. For the farmer who owns 2 or 3 acres of land and 2 bullocks, much could be done to improve his lot. For the leather worker, the potter, and the cloth maker, there is less work than before, as more factories produce goods in the cities and market them throughout the towns and villages.
Every village in India has a potter, maybe 2 potters. Now you set up factories that produced plastic tumblers and glass tumblers and chinaware and whatnot. In the process, you denied to the poor potter his job in the village without creating an alternative job for him. Now what you should have done was, even when you went into the core sector, you should have had a blend where it would have been possible for you to utilize the services of the potter. When you went in to produce shoes, let us say, with the use of machines, you should have also had a blend where it was possible for you to provide jobs to the village cobbler. So this is where things went wrong.
Clay cups were at one time used everywhere for tea, in train stations and tea houses along the roads. They were used only once, so millions were used yearly. Now plastic cups are used. If the government could reinstitute the use of these clay cups in all railroad stations, there would be an enormous increase in work for local potters. Once work is available, methods can be improved. This is Jurai, who is now going to demonstrate the difference between his old potter's wheel and this new one, which was given to him to try out by a local polytechnic college.
चक्का ही ठीक है जो है आप भेजे मतलब जरा हल्का हो जाए छोटा हो जाए यही ठीक.
The new wheel, says Jurai, has a firm base, which means that it spins more evenly and for a longer time.
न चाहिए सब ठीक है बोला भाई छोटा हो जाए और बराबर हो जाए बस.
But it's also uncomfortable to use because the base should be set into the ground. The Polytechnic school, which provided Jurai with his new wheel, is in Allahabad, a city in north-central India. The school has a long-standing program in developing rural, small-scale technologies. They have been successful in selling small-scale agricultural and craft implements to hundreds of villagers in their area. Now, since the new government emphasis on appropriate technologies, the program is becoming a model for polytechnic institutes throughout India, a country which has the third largest number of scientists and technical workers in the world already, but few of them concerned with small-scale technologies. The Polytechnic loans people the money to buy equipment. Once the loan is repaid, they do the same for someone else. This cobbler, once almost out of business because of competition from factory-made shoes, has already made enough money to repay the Polytechnic for his leather stitching machine. The Polytechnic, with some seed money from a German foundation called Bread for the World, has started a program called Integrated Village and Rural Development. The advisor, on leave from Xerox Corporation, is Abhay Bhushan. He grew up near these villages and has come back to work with the Polytechnic's program. In just a few months, he has started projects in 30 villages. He is on his way to visit Sunderlal, who has started a bicycle shop here by the side of the road.
बॉल बेरिंग इसका तुम बॉल बेरिंग इसमें बॉल बेरिंग लगा हुआ हाँ हाँ तो तुम लगा लेते हो कहाँ है बेरिंग तुम्हारा इसमें सब हुआ है इसमें बॉल बेरिंग रहता है हाँ अच्छा सब छल्ला वाला सब लगा लेते बॉल साइकिल की चीज है ये हाँ जितने सामान है सब इसी का पुर्जा है what we have done over here is we have given a loan of 500 rupees for spare parts for bicycles so he can increase his income पूरा complete bicycle हाँ ठीक कर लेते हो Before that, he was only fixing punctures and just doing minor repair work. And he was earning about 4 or 5 rupees a day. But now with our spare parts and things, he can do the complete repair of a bicycle. And his earning has doubled. फायदा ही हुआ कि साहब जो हम काम करते हैं जो साइकिल बिगड़ गई जिसकी तो आया बनवाने हमारे पास अगर सामान नहीं रहेगा तो हम उसमें लगाएंगे क्या अच्छा Since he has increased his business, people come here and stop to get their bicycles fixed. So the pan wala has come over here and selling his pan, bidi and cigarettes. And he's found it, and sometimes a barber also comes along to help people while their bicycles are being fixed. So this sort of a way commerce develops in the village.